Hi, thanks everyone for coming.
My name is Ryan Ratazio. I'm an editor for IndieWire. And I'd like to welcome out the director of the film, Gavin Hood.
Thanks. Thanks for being here so late.
Yeah, and thanks for being here with us, Gavin. Okay, so in this movie, with dealing with the repercussions of the Iraq War, I think it takes audiences to a place that, especially for American ones, that might be uncomfortable for a lot of us, that sort of brings up feelings of complicity and guilt, and especially because it didn't happen very long ago. So, what is the value in going back to this time in history?
That's a great question. Am I on? Can you hear? Yeah, 1, 2, 3. No, it's a great question. What is the value of going back? I sort of think that moment between 9/11, going into Afghanistan, and then more particularly this war, defines largely where we are in terms of modern history. I mean, if we hadn't gone into Iraq, we'd be in a very different place. I don't know what place we'd be in. I suspect it would be a better place, in my view. But everything that has ensued, the rise of ISIS and all those sort of things, I think come from this decision that has seriously backfired to invade another country in the perhaps even sincere hope that you can bring democracy to a certain part of the world and everything will be fine. And that desire drove a whole lot of lies to get there. There were no weapons of mass destruction. We were lied into that war, and thousands of Americans were wounded. Brits died and were wounded, Americans died, and of course hundreds of thousands of Iraqis. So for me, when I saw this story, I just thought, I lived through this whole time. I am an American despite my funny accent. My kids are born. I love this country because I grew up in South Africa, and I know what it's like to live in an authoritarian state where the precious underpinnings of this democracy disappear, and it's horrible. And so for me, this is a patriotic movie about how important it is that we have the values that are American values, that we have checks and balances. I sound overly serious now. And that we don't allow an authoritarian government to lie to us. And I think Katherine is appealing to me because she isn't some larger-than-life character. She's a very ordinary person, just like us, who sees something at her place of work and says, this just ain't right. And it troubles her conscience. And she might have been someone working in a bank, or in a studio, or any of you or me. And you see, and would you risk your job to speak out against what you see as wrongdoing within the organization where you work? And Katherine not only risked her job, but she risked her freedom. And she did it not because she's some noble, cause-seeking person. She's very ordinary, and she never really wanted to put her head above the parapet. So I just thought she was uniquely like us. And I also thought it was a way in to this period of history that really has defined where we are in modern times. And usually your way in is it's big and political, and actually the way in is through an ordinary person. Anyway, a long-winded answer to your very good question.
No, I mean, certainly I'm not saying this, wink, but the current president perhaps wouldn't be here if it were not for some of these things that went on. And so, yeah, it is heroic to see someone sort of small in that moment, doing something doing an act of defiance and having it sort of cause impact in this way.
Yeah, and some people would say that she had no impact because the war happened anyway, and that is true. So why make a movie where someone had no impact? That's a perfectly valid question, but I forget, there's a great book by Albert Camus, what is it? Somebody will know.
Stranger?
No, it's not, I don't think there's a surgeon, and somebody says to him, why are you trying to save this child that's dying anyway? Why are you going to die anyway? And the answer is, because what else are you going to do? You must do what's right. You must try. And in some ways, it seems to me that every single one of us is Katherine Gunn. This is going to sound over the top, but here's why. We're all citizens here, and every day something is landing in your lap, not a big dramatic thing, but the information of what's going on and politics. And it's kind of our duty to inform ourselves and just vote, for example, or just be a citizen. And if you don't, and you give up those rights, I grew up in South Africa during the apartheid years, and I really know what it's like, as I say, to have authoritarianism just rise and rise and rise and rise and rise, till the point where in the 80s we had no right of access to a lawyer. If you were detained under the Internal Security Act, you could be detained indefinitely without a trial, just disappear. And so these rights that we take for granted here in America are not to be taken for granted. And stop, Gavin. You get it. Yeah.
Well, obviously this movie is trafficking in a world of intelligence officers and journalists, both of whom are reviled figures anyway by most of the world. And having spoken to Matt Smith the other day, I know that he met with Martin Bright. So could you speak a little bit about, your conversations with the actual real life people that?
Yeah. So the way I came to the movie was Jed Doherty, the producer online, this guy called me up and said, "Have you ever heard of Katherine Hood?" And I said, "No, should I?" He said, "Just Google her and then call me." So a couple of hours later, of Googling, I called him. I said, "This sounds fascinating. Very ordinary person. She doesn't don a cape or defeat the bad guy. She's just a story about human conscience. And if you go with the story that way, I think you'll like it. And if you expect someone to be heroic and save the world, as most of our movies insist we must do, and therefore we can't watch them with a distance because it's not really us being that superhero, then maybe it doesn't work." But I just went over to London and I met with Katherine, and I spent 5 days every day working with her, and then I met with Martin and the other journalists, and then with Ben Emerson, the lawyer. And after about 3 weeks of just interviewing these people extensively, I thought, okay, I want to make this movie, just because it sort of challenges me about whether I would have that kind of simple courage. And they were just fascinating people who were brave. And I think that someone like Martin and Ed and Peter are amazing journalists, and they're a dying breed, this real investigative journalists. Budgets have been cut in newsrooms for investigative journalism. We're also cynical, we tweet, we get angry, everybody's like trying to score a point. Nobody wants to dig into the real story. They're kind of important to go digging, these sort of folks, And I also think it's kind of a strange time. We're in a kind of post-truth world where we have a president who really doesn't mind if he lies, because he doesn't even feel bad if you tell him he's lying, he just says something else. It's almost, at least Bush and Blair, I think if they were caught in a lie, would have been embarrassed. They kind of knew they were lying, but they also knew it wasn't really cool to be caught lying. And Colin Powell has at least apologized deeply for what he did at the UN and is greatly ashamed of that, and has said how much he regrets that. That was the worst thing he ever did, and he feels terrible. And even Bush has made overtures of apology. I'm not sure why, while he's painting and doing whatever he's doing. Because I think these guys are war criminals, and I think we were led by men of great hubris and little brain. I mean, the notion that you would go into a place like Iraq, with all of its tribal conflict and religious issues, and bring Western democracy and bomb thousands of people and they just love you. I mean, how stupid are you? And I mean that. I grew up in Africa. I know about tribal issues and tensions. We have 11 official languages. Just go backpacking, Tony. You're a freaking elitist snob thinking you're... Sorry, I didn't mean to get upset. But it hurts because people died. Hundreds of thousands of people died. It wasn't a mistake, it was a war crime. So, that's mine. I'm too passionate about it. Thank you, guys.
In some ways, we could have used a Katherine gun, circa, Vietnam War.
Well, we have with Daniel Ellsberg, but you're right. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Please
Daniel said, no, it's interesting because Daniel Ellsberg, as he says in the movie, Daniel leaked the Pentagon Papers, but after.
Right.
And Katherine leaked them before. And here's where she succeeded that I perhaps don't do her justice. Bush and Blair were desperate to get this UN resolution, in particular Blair was, because Admiral Boyce, the head of the British Armed Forces, was refusing, in his words, to put one boot across the Kuwaiti border into Iraq without a written documentation from his Attorney General saying that he was fighting a legal war, because he did not want his men, as he said, to ever be charged with a war crime. He was cognizant of the fact that this was likely an illegal war. And so Tony Blair desperately wanted this UN resolution, because there are two ways you go to war legally, basically, in international law. One is we, the UN, all vote, and we go and we stop a genocide, and we go, right? And the second way is the old-fashioned argument of self-defense, where we're under attack, or we are about to be attacked, and we take preemptive action, and anyone can see that preemptive action is necessary. We're defending ourselves. which is why the WMD issue, the weapons of mass destruction issue, became so important. He is a danger to the world, and he's going to, Tony's putting out these documents that Britain can be attacked by Iraq in 45 minutes, and with chemical weapons, and hyping up the September dossier and the dodgy dossier and all these sort of things. Because Katherine leaking the memo, what happened was Chile and Mexico and all of these smaller nations on the Security Council refused to vote. So they were trying to go for this vote, and when this document came out, they just refused to vote. And in the movie, you see it happen. Well, it looks like they've lost the vote, and they see it on TV, and then they say, but we're going to war anyway. It was literally that quick. So that's why the weapons of mass destruction argument became so important, because they were still looking for a cloak of legitimacy. And now we know they never found any weapons of mass destruction. It was all overhyped. But they were looking for that legitimacy. Had these guys succeeded in getting that vote on the Security Council, we would be looking at it very differently. Then there would have been a UN resolution for that war. Maybe other people would have joined, and we would have gone in again on faulty intelligence, but they would have had perfect cover. So in that sense, Katherine did stop a certain big lie, but she didn't stop the war. Yep.
Well, I'm curious about an aspect behind the scenes of the movie, which is Keira Knightley. Is she an actor that kind of really wanted to work very close with you, or get a lot of guidance, or is she someone that you sort of just hire and get out of the way?
Such a tricky question. I don't know that you ever get out of the way, because it's a very collaborative thing. It's not that you're telling her how to act, it's that you are together trying to find a simple, emotional, truthful moment. And the role of the director is really, especially, I grew up around actors and I was an actor myself. What you're putting your trust in as an actor when you work with a director, if they're performance-driven directors, is that they will smell the truth and they will help you out when it's off. And it's a very gentle and quiet interaction. Directing that kind of performance is not about, hey, you know what you should do? You just walk up and you chat, and I got your back. And she'll say, you want to walk out? And then you go up and you say, she said, I know, it's just, I'm off there. It's very hard to explain, but I'm glued to that monitor. And in a film like this, which is about people and talking and nuance and subtle shifts behind the eyes where she's struggling to decide whether to leak a memo, or you're staying on her face even though the interrogator is talking as she slowly, the cogs click in her head that she's going to get to a point where she says, that moment when she's with GCA, he's saying, you cannot have a lawyer, and you can't speak to a lawyer when he comes to her house. And there's a moment where we just stay on Kira's face, and she finally says, if you charge me, I will speak to a lawyer. If you don't charge me, I won't. I'm paraphrasing the line. But we're not on the person speaking, giving the speech. You just stay on Keira Knightley and stay on Keira Knightley, and that actress goes through every little clicky click in the brain until she finally brings that line out. So I think her performance is amazing. And it's to her credit, but I'd like to think that you, as a director, give her the space, and then also the way you shoot it. The eye lines are very tight to lens. So if you want your audience in those eyes, 75mm lens, throw out the background and look closely here at that lens. She's not shooting cool, low, creepy angles, trying to sexy it up with dark lighting, because then your actress isn't getting the opportunity to really shine. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, that definitely does. So about 15 years ago, you directed a movie called Sozi, which we just practiced how to pronounce it. I tried to butcher it.
You did it perfectly.
I did it, okay. And then you've gone on to do some kind of different things since then. You did a Wolverine movie,
made some mistakes.
Ender's Game, but it
The
seems like
movie
with
was
this,
good. I liked
and with this and Eye in the Sky, like you're sort of going back to doing the kind of movies that you
We'll
seem
see.
to want to be doing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to speak on that at all.
Sure, no, you've summed it up perfectly.
Okay,
You're absolutely right. I think,
so.
no, I think without harping on it too much, I never expected to be here. I grew up far, far away, and we made this little film called Sozi in a foreign language with no movie stars, and we hoped it would be released on the screens in our own country, and suddenly here it was in America, and then it, by pure good luck, gets this thing called the Academy Award. No, you can't plan that. And then I suddenly got offered this job. First of all, I did rendition, which I had a great experience working with New Line, and they pretty much let me do my thing. And coming from my little world, I was used to writing my script, working with my actors, editing and delivering my project. What I wasn't prepared for on Wolverine was this huge corporate experience and a whole other crew shooting me action that I wasn't allowed to shoot because that was specialized over there. And it was quite a learning experience. Let's just leave it at that.
Sure.
And then coming back to something like Eye in the Sky, where you have a great script and you get to work with a producer who's 100% behind the themes and ideas you're trying to explore and isn't driven purely by huge box office, I think you get to make something more honest and you have a happier time. So Eye in the Sky was a wonderful way to find myself again. And then this little story came along, and oh God, we're going to struggle, the money's going to be hard, it's going to be hard to raise the money. But then I met Katherine and I got hooked. And I'm lucky enough to eat 3 meals a day and have a roof over my head, so you might as well enjoy your work.
Yeah, I have to say I didn't see the Wolverine movie, but
Thank you.
I saw Endgame, which was good, and I liked Eye in the Sky.
I learned a lot on Wolverine.
Yeah,
But,
is Wolverine, is that DC or Marvel? I don't know. Marvel, yeah. I haven't seen very many Marvel movies, which
He's
seems my
digging, right?
profession. I should do a better job.
No. I'll tell you a funny story though, because this all sounds way too serious. Can we be funny for a moment? So I'm developing this script with a particular studio, just so you don't think I'm such full of honest. I'm developing this script with a particular studio, not the one we made it with. And we're doing this, and we're going on for a year, and they keep saying they love it, they want to do it, but they keep telling us we're going to have more running down dark alleys, and can't someone throw a brick through a window, and someone should come in and beat her up when she goes, and we need more, there's got to be more thrill, you don't get the genre, Gavin. You go, and then at one point this guy goes, and when does she don her cape? I'm like, she's Wonder Woman now? She's like, super. Yes, she needs to stand up in that court and make a speech. And I say, but she didn't. Well, can't she? And so this whole experience with these guys was all about trying to superhero up. And that's what I mean by we have expectations. And take a moment to think about it, because some of you may feel that, and it's perfectly understandable and legitimate, and maybe the movie sucks, or maybe, but there is an expectation that the hero, we watch all these movies where the hero's wrong and he's going to save the president, and then, everything's falling apart in the world. We know exactly how the freaking thing ends.
Yeah.
He's going to kick ass of the bad guy. One other guy said to me, when I made Ender's Game, and I was in a meeting, and this executive says, he goes, at the end, the alien, he meets the alien, and it's about guilt and so on. He goes, Gavin, I don't understand. Why doesn't he just kick the alien's ass? That's how these movies work. So I guess, and in some sense they're right. But we keep going. You say you don't go to these movies anymore. I have to go with my kids sometimes, and I sit there and they're technically brilliant, and they're all that stuff, and there's so much money at the screen, you get to the end and you go, that's how it's going to end. The evil empire is defeated. We'll repeat that story in sequel 2. And so this is risky because won't fit into a bloody box. So developing it was really tough because people kept saying that sort of thing. And maybe they're right. We'll see whether this works. Please tell your friends if you liked it, and don't if you didn't. But there's something about this ordinary folk trying to do what's right in the world that is, to me, more interesting and more heroic than watching someone with a cape, beating the shit out of the enemy that I've seen him do 100 times wearing a different cape or a mask or an iron thing. It's the same. Am I being mean?
No, you're being right on.
My feeling about Marvel movies is sort of like firing a gun. I would just rather go through life not really having done that.
Yeah, then we tell our kids, don't be violent. Let's go to a movie and see someone beat the crap out of someone, and then don't be violent. So, what mixed messages? But look, there's lots of place for big entertainment, and I'm not knocking it, because there's a lot of times we all kinds of movies, I can watch all kinds of movies, and when a movie in its particular genre is done really well, it's great. It's just feeling a bit of overload of one particular style. And so when you come across this kind of story, it feels as a director, there's so few of these stories that you are even offered or that it's even suggested you can make, and they're very hard to find.
I would love to know if anyone in the audience has some questions.
Yes.
It seems like they do. So I think a microphone will be distributed, if you could just wait for that. We could just start here in the front row. Thanks.
I just can't say how important this is and how much I appreciate this movie. And I hope that the distributor understands how meaningful it will be for so many people if they see it like everyone here. How do you have faith in the distribution? Because that's oftentimes where things go bad.
We have an amazing company, IFC.
Oh, right,
Films.
Independent Film Channel.
Independent film,
So how are they going to do
They've
it
been
in
nothing
smaller?
but- with something like this, you don't have the money to do big marketing campaigns, so you start small,
Right.
and you hope that folks like yourself enjoy the movie and tell
Tougher,
3 friends. That's all you can do, because there's 2 ways of marketing movies in a very broad sense. If you've got a huge movie that costs you $100 and something million, you really have to grab everyone's money in the first weekend in case they hate it. So you blast everything, and I've done a couple of those movies. The marketing campaign is all about telling you to come see it on that opening weekend. You put it in 3,500 cinemas, you get those butts on the seats, you collect that revenue, and hopefully it's good and they keep coming. But if they don't, you've got to crack that opening weekend. On a movie like this, where you simply can't do that, you do the exact opposite. You start very small, in 2 cinemas in LA and a couple in New York. You hope that the word of mouth
That's
is
how
good,
they
and if
used
it
to
isn't,
do it.
they'll be gone. So thank you so much for coming, first of all. I really appreciate it. And I hope you find it something.
I think Keira Knightley should be up for an Academy Award, and some of the other actors too. I think that's how good they were.
She is good, isn't she?
Oh my God, she's awesome, and she's always good. But she's like different and really a whole different character that I've never seen her play before. And
I think the reason she wanted to do this movie because she didn't have to wear a corset.
that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
She just
Thank
put on a
you
pair
so
of
much
jeans
for
and
this
come on
movie.
set.
I think your neighbor here had a question, and he also has the DVD of that.
Oh, great.
Hi, thank you for being here.
Thanks.
I saw Sootsie, it was amazing. My question is, I actually have 2 questions, if you don't mind. One is, how long did it take for you to make this film? And then 2 was, if you had the ability to go back in time, or at least right after the events happened. I know that this took place 2003, 2004-ish, the war happened and so on and so forth. If you made a film like this right after the events of all of this happened, do you think it would have, I know it's going to have a strong impact now, but do you feel like it would have had an even stronger impact?
It's very kind of you, and I have no idea what kind of impact it will have, but thank you. I mean, I think it's just a little piece of, so many people have written about it. All we're doing is, here's a story, here's another way into this war. I think we become a little piece of part of the history that is combined with people's books and journalism, where your generation looks back on this war. This now becomes a part of that story. But I don't know that it changes the world. It's very kind of you to suggest it might. I don't. But it's still, slowly you build up a sense of history. And unfortunately, for good or bad, many of us get our history from movies. So I look at All the President's Men and I understand more about Nixon's era and so on in the Vietnam War than if I read until I watched the great Burns documentary. But so these films, you do want to get them right, because they are in some sense a small part of a historical record. And how long did it take us to make the movie? We shot it in 36 days. I had 6 days with Ray Fiennes to do all these scenes in the court and in the law firm and on the beach. We ran around like crazy. Because there's not a huge budget. So you have to be very selective in how you shoot, which sometimes is a little frustrating. But with good actors like Keira and Rafe, who come really well prepared, and you can just work on those emotional beats and get on with it. So it was pretty tight. Thanks for your question.
Yeah, I think it would have been hard to make this in 2004.
Oh yes, I didn't answer that, sorry.
Oh, no,
you're right. Please.
Because, I thought it was very brave that, just by example, Paul Greengrass did United 93 so soon after that, and that movie sort of kind of was muted, the response to it, and maybe if it had been made later.
No, and I had that when I made Rendition, because we made Rendition when Rendition was still happening, and it really upset people. People were so.
Plus, Hotel Rwanda was made 2004.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt.
No, it's good. Thank you.
I think there's another
Yep.
one over here on the left.
Yeah, it bothers me that Bush, Cheney, and Blair have never really suffered any consequences for this illegal war. But I want to thank you for making this movie and for doing it so well.
That's very kind of you, thank you. And yes, they haven't, and that's partly because they're not signatories to the International Criminal Court. And what's happening because of that is that court is really starting to lose any power, because the African countries, for example, where people have been charged and certain dictators have been dragged into that court. South Africa, for example, is saying, well, why would we be a signature to that court if Britain and America aren't? So international law is tricky because America just will not sign on. And they consider it as a form of giving up your sovereignty, but then you can't expect other countries to sign on. So it's tricky. Great question, though. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we have time for another one or two. I guess right here.
Hi, thank you again.
Thank you.
Wonderful reminder of moral compass. And a real,
That's nicely said. Thank you.
a real tonic for the times.
Thank you.
What did 3 weeks of interviews glean or provide that the adaptation of the book did not?
Great question. I'll give you a couple of examples, and there were many, but here's one. So I'm sitting in a pizza shop in London with Ben Emerson, just in the back of a pizza shop, and I'm talking to this amazing lawyer and trying to keep up because he's very, very bright and quite prickly and wants you to keep up. And he's telling me about the documents, and that he begins to suspect that what he needs to do is he needs to put the war on trial in order to come up with this negligent, oh, why am I going? I'm so exhausted. We've done 3 of these this evening. The defense of necessity. So the defense, we haven't talked about the defense of necessity, have we?
We have not.
Okay, so any lawyers in the room here tonight? So there we go. So lawyers will know that the defense of necessity is generally used for simple things like I'm racing to the hospital with my pregnant wife, I'm pulled over by a traffic officer, policeman, he says, you're speeding, he gives me a ticket, I go, yes, I'm guilty, but I'm doing it because I'm trying to save a life. I am guilty, but my defense is that it was necessary in order to achieve a higher purpose, which is usually the saving of human life, not that I need to go and buy my Starbucks, all right? So Ben goes, well, hold on a minute, this defense, you admit you've broken the law, but you have a reason to say why it was necessary to do so. If the war is illegal, perhaps it was necessary to break the Official Secrets Act in order to potentially save hundreds of thousands of lives. He's still to this day, and so is Katherine, upset that the case was shut down and never got to test that in court. So, so one of the things I gleaned from Ben sitting in this pizza shop is he's explaining this all to me, and I said, okay, so then you decided you had to know that the war was deemed illegal by the Attorney General right up until those few days before when he changed his mind. How did you know when you called for his documents, his advice to Blair, which he'd given on multiple occasions in written form, in the year leading up, how did you know you'd get what you thought would be there, that he would say the war was illegal? And he said, well, Elizabeth Wilmshurst, the Deputy Attorney General, resigned, right? I said, yeah, she resigned, but she didn't say why. So you just suspected that well, I called Elizabeth and I asked her if I could come and have a cup of tea. I'm like, fuck, I got a scoop. So that kind of thing goes in my notebook, and I still have it in my notebook. And then I said, okay, and then you were upset with Ken MacDonald, and how did you know Ken? And he goes, so that's Lord Ken MacDonald. And the shit's going to hit the fan tomorrow in England because one of the Observer journalists is calling him to ask why he dropped the case and what he thinks of the movie. So that's going to be fun. So that's the man on the beach. So the man on the beach is not some arbitrary friend. He's Lord Ken MacDonald. That's like a senator, right? So a very senior man in the British establishment who was director of public prosecutions at the time, had known Ben when they were both young lawyers, had a house on the beach in Norfolk where they all like having houses in the Hamptons. They all know each other. And he wanders over to his friend Ben and says, why are you taking this case? Well, depending on how far you push that, that's malfeasance in public office. You don't go to defense counsel as the prosecutor and suggest that they drop the case in any way, right? So that's awkward. And Ben is pissed off about it, and was. And then when he comes to him on the beach the second time and says, it wasn't really me who wanted to prosecute, it tries to wiggle out of it. And Ben didn't say, why don't you go fish somewhere else? He used stronger language, so he took that license. Why don't you, so they're not friends anymore. He was very upset at the way Ken came to him and feels that he switched sides all the time. So he's telling me this. It's amazing, so I'm writing it all down, right? So then, of course, I send him the scenes, and we check the scenes, and he goes, Gavin, don't have him say that I should drop the case. I don't really want him charged with malfeasance. Just hedge around. So there you go. So I don't know if that gives you some insight into the process, but For me, it was fascinating because I've never made a movie about people who are still alive. So I go back to Martin Bright. I'm, geez, I'm stressed. I just got this from Ben, and he's a journalist. He does it all the time. He says, dude, you got a scoop. It's great.
You became a journalist.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been there. So this was quite an interesting experience, and it still makes me feel quite weird. Because when I did, for example, Eye in the Sky, we did a huge amount of research. We had drone pilots, and we had intelligence officers, but the characters we were creating were fictional. And that's just different, you know, you're not, but here you're accountable to a lot of things, and a lot of people. And obviously, you know, Ben and Martin and the journalists and Katherine, for them, the script approval process is easier. It's not so easy with Ken MacDonald, and mostly from him it's been no comment, but there's pressure mounting to say, because he's not wrong on the beach when he says it wasn't up to me to prosecute. Because when you go digging in the Official Secrets Act, the Director of Public Prosecutions has great autonomy in England to decide who he prosecutes, except in cases of the Official Secrets Act, where he's supposed to get the permission of the Attorney General. Although Ben yesterday was disputing that that's that clear in the Act, and I won't get into the weeds. But so perhaps Ken did go to Lord Goldsmith and say, boss, we want to prosecute? And boss says yes. And then defense says, I'd like your boss's documents. And boss says, maybe we don't want to drop this case. But nobody's copped to that yet. So the journalist yesterday is going, Gavin, do you think there were very dark forces putting pressure on them to drop the case? I don't know. Ask Ken MacDonald. I suspect the simple explanation is that his boss, Peter, didn't want his documents revealed. So he dropped the case. But maybe there was some dark force of Bush or Cheney. I doubt it, actually. I just think it's a simple case of embarrassment. But so far, it's been no comment. But thank you for the question. That was a fun one. Yeah.
Okay, I think we can do one last one, and since I've been biased to this corner, I do see a person up there. Or
And we'll do both.
okay, we can do
Because I
these
feel
two.
bad.
All right, we can do these two.
He's been very patient.
All right, sorry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got it. Oh, cool.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. It's a great movie.
Thank
My
you.
question is, I'm sure you did so much research
Mm.
about the whole idea, Catherine, and all the employees. But were you able to talk with any of the Iraqis who were living? Because in the Middle East, it was like everybody knew there's no weapons of mass
Right.
destruction. It was all fabricated
Yeah.
before even the war. But were you able to talk about the journalists or any Iraqis at the same time who were living the situation?
That's a beautiful question. Where are you from originally?
I'm Lebanese.
Okay. So I wish I could say to you, yes, I went to Iraq and spoke to a lot of people. I didn't, but I did speak to various Iraqis that were in a scene that sadly didn't end up in the movie, which was a hospital scene where Peter was when he was right when the bombing was happening. Peter, the journalist Peter Bowman, was in there, and we ended up not using that scene, but we did a lot of research and talked to people who had fled Iraq, and they told me some of their stories. But in the movie itself, only Peter went to Iraq when the bombing started. He actually stayed there for many years and tried to find the weapons of mass destruction and went to every site. So I'm ashamed to say I don't have Iraqis as part of the film, but some of the stories from some of the people who told me about what went on in that hospital, which is where Peter was, and Peter introduced me to something, were very, very heartbreaking. And I have no idea what it must feel like to be in a city where everything's blowing up around you. I mean, you see that footage now, and we see it like some video game. And for those folks, you know, imagine this building next door just blowing to smithereens. And this is going to bring a flowering of democracy. I mean, what kind of thinking? So I'm sorry and thank you. Thank you. Yes.
There's a question right here.
Here.
You can take mine.
Why, thank you. Great film.
Thank you, sir.
I'm a visual effects artist. I don't go to a lot of the movies I work on. I come to movies like yours to clear my palate.
Oh.
Save the Cat, if you're familiar with, I know you are, has ruined so much, I think. There's another South African who's battling a great headwind right now to do a noble cause. He's made some mistakes along the way,
Yeah.
but I was wondering if you'd ever do his story. I read a article, it's more like an essay, you can look it up, my phone will come in here where I also looked it up, and it has in the title, or am I a dead whistleblower? And it talks about, this gentleman talks about how $2.4 billion a day is the revenue of the oil industry right now. And they will do anything, spending billions to keep it that way. So the person I'm talking about is Elon Musk.
All right.
I was wondering if you'd ever consider doing his story and the story on Tesla as it evolves or as it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like an amazing story, and I wouldn't presume to suggest that Elon would want me to do it or how he feels it. I would be very interested in seeing a film like that. I mean, he is a controversial character in some ways, but at the same time, he's a brilliant innovator, an amazing man. So that's great, because you don't want a perfect character. His ups and downs and, you know, moments of humility and moments of ego. I think it would be a fantastic story.